Hey guys, tonight, dim the lights, put your phone face down, let your shoulders drop a little. Because tonight, we're not chasing battles, betrayals, or dramatically poisoned goblets. Tonight, we're doing something much slower, much dustier, much more barefoot. We're going back to prehistoric time. Not the movie version with dramatic mammoth chases and constant screaming, but the real version, the extremely repetitive one. The one where most of human history was basically just getting through the day without falling into a hole. So imagine this is a normal day. No heroic music, no destiny. Just a small group of humans who don't know they're prehistoric because, of course they don't. They're just people with sore backs and questionable hygiene. Let's start very early, before sunrise. Because prehistoric humans did not wake up refreshed. They woke up because the cold did it for them. Sleep in the prehistoric world was not 8 peaceful hours on a memory foam mattress. It was fragmented, light, frequently interrupted by noises that might be wind or might be something with teeth. They slept close together, not because they were emotionally close, but because heat is heat. Bodies were blankets. Children were wedged wherever they fit. Personal space had not yet been invented. Someone wakes first, not because they're an early riser, but because their hip has gone numb against the hard ground. They shift, someone else groans, a child kicks, and just like that, the day has unofficially started. There is no alarm clock, no concept of 5 more minutes. Once you're awake, you're awake. Lying still too long means getting colder. The fire from the night before is probably still smoldering, if they're lucky. If they're not lucky, someone is about to spend the morning trying to coax embers back into life, blowing gently like their entire existence depends on it, because it does. Fire is not optional. Fire is survival. Fire keeps predators away. Fire makes food edible. Fire is basically the most valuable roommate anyone has ever had. While that's happening, people stretch. Not yoga, more like slow, creaky movements accompanied by sighs that say, "Yep, still alive." There is no breakfast buffet. There is not even really breakfast. Food happens when food happens. If there's leftover meat from the day before, it might get passed around. Cold, chewy, better than nothing. If there are roots, berries, or nuts gathered earlier, those get shared too. Portion sizes are not generous. Nobody's counting calories, but everyone knows food must last. Overeating is not a personality trait here, it's a mistake. Children eat first sometimes, not because the society is especially sentimental, but because losing children is expensive in evolutionary terms. Adults can survive hunger longer, kids cannot. While people eat, there is not much talking. Morning is quiet. Energy is conserved. Also, nobody has anything new to say. The same people, the same place, the same concerns. After eating, the group slowly shifts into motion. This isn't organized. There's no clipboard, no manager assigning tasks, but everyone knows what needs to be done. Some adults begin preparing tools. Stone blades need sharpening. Wooden handles need fixing. Bindings made from sinew or plant fibers loosen over time. Tool maintenance is constant. If something breaks later, it might mean a failed hunt, or an injury, or worse, being mocked quietly by everyone else. Others begin preparing to gather. That means baskets, simple containers, nothing fancy. Gathering is not the easy job people sometimes imagine. It requires memory, knowledge. You need to know which plants are edible, which ones will just make you miserable, and which ones will kill you in an incredibly inconvenient way. That knowledge is not written down. It lives in people's heads, and it's passed along through repetition. Children follow adults. They are not shielded from daily life. There is no concept of childhood as a protected bubble. Children learn by watching, by carrying smaller loads, by being corrected gently, or sometimes not gently at all. By now, the sun is rising, not dramatically, just slowly brightening the world. The group begins to split. Some go out to gather, roots, tubers, berries if they're in season, leaves, seeds. Others prepare for hunting. Hunting is not constant.
It's exhausting and dangerous and often unsuccessful. Despite what movies suggest, prehistoric humans were not sprinting after mammoths every afternoon. That would be an incredible waste of energy. Hunting happens strategically, based on need, based on opportunity, based on whether anyone feels like risking their life today. Those who hunt check their weapons: simple spears, throwing sticks, maybe stone-tipped projectiles. There is quiet coordination, eye contact, small gestures. No speeches, no inspirational quotes, just the understanding that everyone involved would prefer to come back alive. As they leave, the rest of the group settles into the rhythm of gathering. This part of the day is slow, repetitive, physically demanding in a very unglamorous way. People bend, dig, pull, carry. They move through familiar territory, land they know intimately, every rock, every tree. This isn't wandering, it's navigation through a mental map built over years. They check places where food grew before. They note changes, dry patches, new growth. If something looks wrong, they remember it. Memory is survival. Children ask questions, or they wander off slightly and are pulled back. Predators don't need much opportunity. As they gather, they snack, small bites here and there. Enough to keep energy up, not enough to reduce what they bring back. Meanwhile, hunting parties move carefully. They walk long distances, sometimes hours, sometimes returning empty-handed. If they find animals, they don't charge immediately. They observe. They track. They follow signs that look like nothing to us: a bent blade of grass, a disturbed patch of dirt. Hunting is patience, not action. If a hunt happens, it's quick, messy, stressful. But we're not lingering there tonight. This isn't a battle channel. This is bedtime history. So let's say the hunt is successful. Not wildly so, just enough. By midday, the sun is high. The group begins to reconverge. Gatherers return first, loads strapped to backs, arms sore, feet dusty. They drop what they've collected in a central area. Everything is shared. Not because they're utopian, but because hoarding gets you excluded, and exclusion is death. Children get tasks to sort, watching the younger ones, shooing animals away. The fire is tended again, always the fire. If there's meat, it needs processing, skinning, cutting, drying if possible. This takes time, skill, and coordination. No one is in a rush. Rushing causes injuries, and injuries linger. People work in silence or low murmurs, occasional jokes, nothing loud. The heat makes everyone a little slower. Movements become deliberate. By early afternoon, food is prepared enough to eat. This is the closest thing to a meal the day has. People sit, squat, lean. They eat steadily, no talking with mouths full, not out of politeness, but efficiency. Fatty parts are valued, organs are prized, nothing is wasted. Children get pieces cut small, elders are given easier to chew portions. After eating, there is a lull. This is not nap time exactly, but it's close. People rest, repair clothing, pick at tools. Some doze lightly, always lightly. Someone is always alert, not assigning, just instinctively. This quiet stretch is important. Bodies recover, minds wander. Stories may be told, not long ones, fragments, repeated tales everyone already knows. These aren't epic narratives yet, they're practical, lessons disguised as memories. As the afternoon wears on, activity resumes gently. More gathering closer to camp, more tool work, more watching children. The hunters, if they haven't returned yet, come back now, tired, quiet. Success or failure is obvious. Nobody asks dramatic questions. If they return empty-handed, there is no blame, just recalculation. As the sun begins to sink, the group subtly shifts again. They prepare for night. Food is secured, fire is fed, sleeping areas are arranged. Children grow sleepy. They lean against adults, carried when legs stop cooperating. Darkness comes quickly, and with it, vulnerability. People cluster again, close, warm. The fire crackles, shadows dance, someone pokes at embers. And slowly, the day winds down. No sense of accomplishment, no checklists completed, just relief. They made it through another ordinary day. And tomorrow, they will do it again.
All right, settle back in. We're drifting into the part of the day where everything slows down just a little more than you'd expect. Because prehistoric afternoons were not productive in the modern sense. They were about endurance and energy management, and quietly accepting that your knees were never going to feel great again. After that midday lull, people don't suddenly leap up with motivation. There is no second coffee, no power-through-it mentality. Instead, there's a general understanding that doing too much is how you get hurt, and being hurt is how you become a problem for everyone else. So, tasks resume gently. Someone notices a tool handle loosening. They sit down and fix it, not urgently, just steadily. Another person checks a skin left out to dry, turns it, smooths it. This is long-term thinking. Clothing doesn't appear overnight. It takes days of boring effort. Children are everywhere, always underfoot, always touching things they shouldn't. There is no separate space for them, no kids' corner. They watch everything, they mimic movements, they practice with tiny sticks that are absolutely not safe. Adults correct them casually. A hand moved, a head gently turned, a low sound that means not like that. Teaching is constant, but invisible. Nobody sits anyone down for a lecture. You learn by doing it wrong repeatedly until you don't. The afternoon sun shifts. Shadows stretch. This is often when people do quieter work, things that don't require leaving camp. Weaving simple baskets, braiding fibers, repairing cords. These are tasks that can be done while half watching the surroundings, which is important because danger does not send a calendar invite. Occasionally, someone pauses, listens. Everyone else does too, for just a second. Bird calls, wind, insects. Everything seems normal. Work resumes. This constant awareness is exhausting, but it's so ingrained that nobody thinks about it. Being alert is just baseline. There is no anxiety spiral, no overthinking, just readiness. If someone wanders a little too far from camp, someone else subtly shifts position. Not dramatic, just coverage. Prehistoric people didn't have security systems. They had people. As the afternoon wears on, hunger starts to creep back in. Not sharply, just a dull reminder. There may be small snacks again, a bit of dried meat, a handful of nuts. Nothing heavy. Big meals at night are risky. Digestion makes you slow, and slow at night is a terrible idea. As the light begins to soften, preparations for evening quietly begin. Firewood is gathered, more than needed, always more than needed, because running out after dark is not an option anyone wants to test. Someone rearranges sleeping areas slightly. This changes often, based on who's injured, who's sick, who's pregnant, who's just very young. Elders are positioned where they're safest, not because of sentimentality, but because losing knowledge is catastrophic. There are no libraries, no backups. When an elder dies, entire mental databases disappear. As the sun sinks lower, animals become more active. Everyone knows this. Conversation drops off again. Dinner, such as it is, happens around now. Not elaborate, not celebratory, just nourishment. People eat, they share, they chew slowly. There is no rush to finish and do something else. There is nothing else. Children are noticeably sleepier now. Heads drop, eyes half close. Adults notice this. They start settling them in. This is not bedtime in the modern sense. There is no routine, no story followed by lights out. Children fall asleep when they fall asleep, usually in someone's lap, or against a shoulder, or curled up wherever warmth is most accessible. As darkness arrives, the fire becomes the center of everything.
It's tended carefully, not too big, not too small. Flames draw attention. Too much light can be dangerous. The group arranges itself instinctively. A loose circle, backs protected, lines of sight maintained. This isn't conscious strategy, it's habit layered on instinct, layered on experience. Night is when people talk more, quietly, low voices. This is when stories surface. Not epic legends, not yet. More like memories, observations, reminders. Don't go near that place. That plant made someone sick once. That animal behaves differently when it's injured. Stories are tools. They carry information wrapped in narratives so it sticks. Children listen, even if they pretend not to. The fire crackles. Sparks rise. Someone pokes at it with a stick, not because it needs it, just because hands like to do things. At some point, people begin to drift towards sleep. Not at once. Someone always stays more alert. Not assigned, not rotated, just whoever is least tired, or most anxious, or naturally lighter sleeping. Sleep at night is shallow, fragmented. People wake often, shift positions, check surroundings. A noise causes eyes to open instantly, muscles tense, then relax. False alarm. Again. Children wake and resettle. Someone pulls them closer. A hand rests on a small back. Time passes strangely at night, slow, stretchy. There are no clocks, no hours, just darkness punctuated by moments of awareness. Eventually, the cold deepens. People huddle tighter. The fire dims slightly, not extinguished, never extinguished. And slowly, despite everything, sleep returns. This is not restful sleep, but it's enough. Enough to do it all again. And tomorrow will be nearly identical. That's the part modern minds struggle with. There is no sense of progress from day to day, no long-term plans beyond survival. And yet, within this repetitive rhythm, humanity slowly accumulates changes, a better tool shape, a smarter gathering route, a more effective story. Nothing flashy, nothing dramatic, just tiny improvements layered over thousands of years. But for the people living it, it's just Tuesday. Let's linger here for a moment longer, because prehistoric life wasn't miserable in the way we sometimes imagine. It was hard, it was uncertain, but it was also deeply familiar. Everyone knew their role, everyone mattered. There was no meaningless work, no pointless tasks. Every action connected directly to staying alive. That clarity brings a kind of calm, not happiness, not comfort, but purpose. As the night stretches on, dreams come and go. We don't know what they dreamed. Animals, memories, fears. Brains worked the same then as now, just with fewer inputs. At some point, the sky lightens again, and somewhere, someone stirs. The cycle begins anew, and we'll follow it further next time.
All right, let's ease back in. If you're listening to this while half awake, that's perfect, because prehistoric life involved a lot of being awake without doing very much. We've followed a normal day from morning to night. Now let's stretch out a little wider, because not every day was the same. Some days were slower. Some days were ruined by things no one could control, like weather. Prehistoric humans lived at the mercy of it, not metaphorically, literally. If it rained, everything changed. Rain-soaked clothing made from skins and fibers. It cooled bodies quickly. It made fires harder to keep alive. It turned paths into mud and gathering into misery. On rainy days, people stayed closer together, closer to shelter, whatever shelter meant in that place. Shelter might be a cave, or a rock overhang, or a carefully chosen spot with trees blocking the wind. There were no umbrellas, no waterproof layers, just acceptance. Work still happened, but slower. Gathering was limited. Hunting was postponed. Instead, these days were often spent waiting. Waiting is a skill prehistoric humans mastered. They waited for weather to pass, for injuries to heal, for food sources to recover, for animals to return to familiar routes. Modern life hates waiting. Prehistoric life depended on it. During long stretches of inactivity, people focused on maintenance. Clothing was checked, stitching reinforced, tears repaired. This work was quiet, repetitive, almost meditative. Hands moved automatically while minds wandered. This is probably when people thought the most, not in big philosophical ways, but in small, practical reflections. Who was getting slower? Who was getting stronger? Who might not make it through the next cold season? Nobody said these things out loud. You didn't need to. Children were kept close on these days. Rain increased risk. Slippery ground, poor visibility. Adults corrected them more often. Not harshly, just firmly. Danger made people more serious. When the rain stopped, the world smelled different. Earthy, sharp. Animals behaved differently too. Tracks were easier to see, but movement was unpredictable. Some days were cold instead. Even in warm climates, nights could be brutal. Cold seeped into bones. It slowed fingers. It made fine motor tasks harder. On cold days, people moved less. They conserved energy. Fire became everything. It wasn't just warmth, it was morale. Sitting near fire calmed people. You could see faces. You could relax your shoulders. Without fire, night was oppressive, endless, unforgiving. People fed the fire obsessively. Small sticks, larger logs. Fire management was an art. Too big wasted fuel. Too small invited danger. Children learned fire respect early, not through rules, through watching consequences. A burned hand once was enough. As days passed, routines repeated. But within that repetition, subtle changes happened. A child got taller. An elder got slower. Someone coughed more than usual. Illness was part of daily life. Most sicknesses were mild. Coughs, fevers. People rested when they could. The group compensated. But some illnesses didn't pass. When someone was seriously sick, life adjusted around them. They were moved closer to the fire, given easier food, watched more closely. Care was not sentimental, but it was real. Abandonment happened sometimes, but it was rare, and it was a last resort. Keeping people alive meant keeping knowledge alive. As weeks went by, people tracked time without calendars. They noticed plant cycles, animal migrations, temperature shifts. Time was seasonal, not numerical. Before the rains, after the cold, when the berries return. That's how life was measured. As seasons changed, daily routines shifted. Longer days meant more gathering. Shorter days meant tighter schedules. In colder months, days were compressed, less movement, more huddling. People slept more then, not because they were lazy, because staying awake burned calories. Winter, where it existed, was about survival, not productivity. But let's stay in a milder stretch of time, a long, uneventful period. These were the majority of prehistoric days. Nothing dramatic happened. Nobody died. Nobody invented anything groundbreaking. And yet, these days mattered the most, because this is when social bonds formed. People learned each other's habits, strengths. Who snored, who wandered too far,
who always remembered where food grew. Small tensions existed. They had to. Living that close, constantly, with no privacy, of course people got irritated. But conflict was handled quietly. A sharp look, a brief separation, someone going off with a different task. Fighting was dangerous. Injury was unacceptable. So people learned emotional restraint early. This doesn't mean they were peaceful saints, it means they were practical. As evenings rolled in again and again, nights repeated their pattern. Fire, food, low voices. Stories slowly became longer, more detailed. Characters emerged, patterns formed. This is where myth began, not in thunderous moments, but in boredom. Boredom gives the mind space. As children grew, their roles expanded. They carried more, watched siblings, practiced skills more seriously. There was no ceremony marking adulthood, just gradual expectation. One day you were trusted with something important, and that was that. Adults aged visibly. Without mirrors, aging was felt more than seen. Stiffness, fatigue. Elders moved less, but spoke more. When they spoke, their words carried weight. When an elder corrected someone, it wasn't debated. Experience was authority. As time stretched on, the group adapted subtly. Camp locations shifted, routes changed. These decisions were made collectively, without meetings. Someone suggested, others agreed, they moved. Leadership was fluid. The best hunter led hunts. The best gatherer guided gathering. Status came from usefulness, not titles. Days blurred together. And that's the point. Prehistoric life wasn't about individual days. It was about continuity. Staying alive long enough for the next generation to take over. Everything else was secondary. As night falls again, familiar as ever, people settle in. Firelight flickers, shadows dance. Children sleep quickly, adults drift more slowly. Another ordinary day ends. No one records it, no one remembers it individually, but stacked together, these days build humanity. Quietly, relentlessly.
All right, settle back in again. If you've been drifting in and out, that's perfect, because this part of prehistoric life didn't arrive with alarms either. It crept in, quietly, almost politely. So far, we've been living inside routine. Day after day, morning cold, afternoon drag, night vigilance. And most of the time, that routine held. But every once in a while, something shifted. Not dramatically, not all at once, just enough to make everyone a little more alert. It might start with food. A familiar plant doesn't grow back where it usually does. A patch that's been reliable for years comes up empty. Nobody panics, not yet. They note it, mentally. Gatherers go a little farther the next day, then a little farther again. That means longer walks, more energy spent, less margin for error. Hunters notice changes too. Animals don't pass through when expected. Tracks thin out. Migration patterns subtly shift. This isn't interpreted as a bad sign. There's no superstition attached yet. It's just information. The group adapts, because adaptation is what they do best. Camp locations change more frequently. Temporary shelters become more common. People carry more with them, which means leaving more behind. This is inconvenient, but manageable, at least for a while. As days stretch on, bodies feel it. More walking means more strain. Feet ache, joints complain. Minor injuries happen more often. A twisted ankle, a strained muscle. Nothing catastrophic, but everything adds up. When someone is injured, the group slows. They have to. Leaving someone behind isn't efficient, it's risky, and it breaks trust. So the pace adjusts. This affects food intake, which affects energy, which affects mood. Tension creeps in. Not shouting, not fighting, just silence where there used to be low conversation. Shorter looks, less patience. Children feel it too. They cling more. They're corrected more sharply. Evenings become quieter. Stories don't stop, but they shorten. People sleep closer together, not for warmth, for reassurance. Then weather complicates things. A longer than usual dry period, or rain that doesn't seem to end. Firewood becomes harder to find. Dry material is scarce. Fire is still maintained, but it takes more effort. Someone stays up longer, watching it. Sleep becomes worse. Poor sleep makes everything harder. Decision-making suffers. Tempers thin. Elders speak more often now, not to scold, to guide. They remember other hard stretches, other times things changed. Their advice is calm, grounded. Move earlier in the day. Stay near water. Don't split the group too far. These suggestions are followed, not because elders are wise mystics, but because they've survived this before. Eventually, a decision forms, not announced, not debated, just accepted. It's time to move farther. Not just a day's walk, but a real shift. This is significant. Territory is familiarity, memory, safety. Leaving it means stepping into uncertainty. Preparation begins slowly. People carry less sentiment, more practicality. Only the most useful items are taken. Tools, fire-starting materials, basic containers. Everything else is abandoned without ceremony. Children sense something is different. They're kept closer, carried more often. The day of departure feels strange. The camp looks the same, but it's already becoming memory. No one lingers. Lingering invites doubt. They move. The pace is careful, measured. People scan constantly. New land requires new maps. Gathering resumes cautiously, testing plants, observing animals. Everything is unfamiliar. This is when knowledge matters most. Mistakes are more likely, consequences more severe. The group stays tighter than usual. At night, fire is guarded obsessively. No one relaxes fully. Sleep is lighter. Dreams are restless. After days or weeks, things begin to stabilize again. New routines form. New landmarks become familiar. New gathering spots are memorized. The group exhales, just a little. But change leaves marks. Someone didn't make the journey as well as others. An injury worsened. A sickness lingered. Care increases. Food is adjusted. Tasks reassigned. If someone dies during this period, it is handled quietly. There are no funerals as we imagine them, but there is recognition. The body is placed respectfully, away from camp. The group pauses, briefly, then moves on. This isn't coldness, it's survival. Grief exists, but it cannot dominate. Life insists on continuation. Children ask fewer questions now. They observe more. These moments shape them deeply. They learn impermanence early. They learn adaptability. Over time, the memory of the old camp fades. The new place becomes home. Stories adjust. Back then, before we moved, when food was scarce, memory becomes lesson, and eventually routine returns. Morning cold, afternoon drag, night fire. Different land, same rhythm. This is how prehistoric life advanced, not through innovation bursts, but through displacement. Every move exposed people to new environments, new challenges. Some tools changed, some habits shifted. Nothing intentional,
just response. A slightly better shelter placement, a smarter fire layout, a more efficient route. Small changes stacked over generations. And occasionally, change arrived faster. A large animal herd appeared unexpectedly. A new food source was discovered. A natural shelter provided unusual safety. These moments felt lucky. The group benefited. Children born during these periods grew up healthier, stronger. They remembered abundance, and someday they would face scarcity again, because that was life. No steady upward curve, just fluctuation. As the years passed, people aged. Some died young, some reached ages we'd still call old. Elders became fewer, more precious. Their stories expanded. They spoke of multiple moves, multiple hard times. Their presence reassured the group. If they had survived this many changes, so could everyone else. Eventually, new children were born who never knew the original land. To them, this place was all there had ever been. And that's how humanity spread. Not through conquest, not through ambition, but through necessity. Through ordinary people adjusting their ordinary routines when the world nudged them. As night settles again in this new place that is no longer new, the group gathers around fire. The same low voices, the same familiar positions. Children sleep. Adults watch flames. Another stares into the darkness, listening, not afraid, just aware. Another day survived, another small step forward, and tomorrow they'll wake up sore, hungry, alive. And for prehistoric humans, that was everything.
All right. Settle in one more time. By now, the rhythm should feel familiar. Wake, eat a little, work carefully, wait, sleep lightly. But life wasn't just days repeating. It was people changing inside those days. So let's slow down and live inside a longer stretch of time, years instead of hours. Because prehistoric life was not short in feeling, even if it was often short in length. Children grew up fast, not rushed, just exposed. From the moment they could walk, they were part of everything. No separation, no shielding. They saw injuries, they saw sickness, they saw death. Not graphically, not dramatically, just as something that happened. A body that stopped moving, a space by the fire that stayed empty. Questions were answered simply, sometimes not at all. Children learned emotional regulation early, not because adults were wise therapists, but because panic helped no one. Play still existed, of course it did. Children chased each other, threw stones, invented simple games, but play blended seamlessly into learning. Throwing became aim, running became stamina, pretending became rehearsal. By the time a child was considered grown, there was no moment of transition, no ceremony, no announcement. They were just useful. Trusted with sharper tools, sent farther from camp, asked for opinions. Adolescence, as we understand it, didn't exist. There was no prolonged identity crisis, no luxury of confusion. You were who you were good at being, and if you weren't good at much yet, you learned quickly. Adults lived under constant physical strain. Their bodies told the story of their lives. Hands scarred, joints swollen, teeth worn down. Pain was normal, expected. People adapted to it mentally. They didn't complain much, not because they were stoic heroes, but because complaining didn't fix anything. Instead, they adjusted how they moved, how they sat, how they slept. You can tell a lot about a prehistoric person by how they stood up. Slowly, carefully, using muscle memory perfected over decades. Pregnancy and childbirth were constant realities, not rare events, just part of life. Women worked until they couldn't, then rested, then worked again. Birth was dangerous. Everyone knew this. When it went well, life continued almost immediately. When it didn't, the loss was absorbed quietly. Grief existed, but it had no stage. Children who survived early years were valued deeply, not coddled, but protected. Infants were carried constantly, against bodies, warm, safe. This closeness mattered. It regulated breathing, temperature, heart rate. Prehistoric parenting was intensely physical, less verbal, more tactile. As adults aged, their roles shifted. Older adults hunted less, gathered less, but they observed more. They corrected routes, warned of past mistakes, remembered old patterns. Their value increased as their physical ability declined. Knowledge was everything. Elders were walking archives. Losing one wasn't just sad, it was destabilizing. So they were cared for. Not indulgently, but deliberately. Easier food, better sleeping spots, less exposure. This wasn't kindness as ideology, it was investment. Groups that kept elders survived better. As years passed, camps changed. Some locations were revisited, others abandoned forever. Memory tied people to places. This is where, this is when. Land was layered with story. Over long periods, small innovations appeared. A slightly sharper tool edge, a better way to tie fibers, a smarter fire layout. No one said, "I have invented something." It just stuck. Someone copied it, then someone else did too. If it worked, it stayed. If it didn't, it vanished without record. Progress was quiet, uncelebrated. Most days were still ordinary, but over decades, bodies accumulated experience. People could sense changes before they happened. A shift in wind, a strange silence, an unfamiliar animal call. This intuition wasn't mystical. It was pattern recognition trained by survival. You didn't need to explain it. You just acted. As people aged further, death became more common. Not sudden, not dramatic, just gradual absence. Someone didn't wake up or didn't recover. The group adjusted, roles redistributed, tasks shifted. Children stepped into responsibilities earlier. Life moved forward, always forward. There was no nostalgia as we feel it, no longing for the old days, because the old days were just as hard. Memory wasn't romanticized, it was instructional. As generations overlapped, stories stretched backwards further. Grandparents told children about times before their parents were born. This created continuity, a sense of us. Not a nation, not a tribe in the modern sense, just a lineage of shared survival. And that's how identity formed, not from symbols or flags, but from collective memory. As the group aged together, bonds deepened. People knew each other intimately, every habit, every flaw. Conflict still happened, of course it did, but it was managed carefully, because breaking the group was not an option. Isolation meant death, so people learned compromise early, not because it felt good, but because it worked. As years turned into decades, the environment continued to change. Climate shifted slowly, vegetation moved, animals adapted. Humans followed, not intentionally, just reactively, step by step. By the end of a long life, a prehistoric person had lived through multiple worlds, different camps, different hardships, different rhythms. And yet, every day still felt familiar. Wake, eat, work, wait, sleep. When death finally came, it was often quiet, a slowing, a deep rest that didn't end. The group acknowledged it briefly. Then life continued. Not because they didn't care, but because caring didn't stop the sun from rising. Children watched this, absorbed it. They learned that life was finite and precious, not in a sentimental way, but in a practical one. You stayed alive, you helped others stay alive. That was meaning. And in the next part, we'll step back one final time to see what all these ordinary days added up to without anyone realizing it at the time.
All right, let's take one last, long, slow dive into prehistoric life. The kind of dive that lets you feel time stretching like thick honey. By now, we've moved through mornings and afternoons, through seasons and weather, through childhood, adulthood, and old age. We've seen routine, disruption, adaptation, and survival. And now, let's pause and look at the bigger picture. Because prehistoric life was much more than the sum of individual days. Time passed quietly, very quietly. Not in calendar years, not in decades, not in centuries, but in accumulated experience, in repetition, in small changes that stacked on top of each other. One day a fire burned a little brighter. One day a tool worked a little better. One day a child learned something faster than the last. Individually, these days seemed meaningless, ordinary, boring even. But over months, years, and generations, the ordinary became extraordinary, because survival is itself an achievement. Groups spread out, step by step, camp by camp, river by river, forest by forest. The same patterns repeated everywhere: morning wake, food gathering, tool maintenance, childcare, stories, night vigilance. And in every place, people left traces, not physical footprints we necessarily find, but traces in memory, skill, and social connection. These traces accumulated, transmitted across generations, without writing, without formal teaching. Learning happened silently, through observation, through imitation, through quiet repetition. This is the foundation of culture. Imagine a group sitting quietly around a fire at night. Stories are told. Details matter. Which plants were safe, which berries were bitter, which animals to avoid, which paths were reliable. The children listen, perhaps half asleep, half distracted, yet they remember more than we can measure. Knowledge like this is slow, gradual, layered, but it is cumulative. It is also fragile. One harsh season, one unexpected injury, one forgotten skill, and it can vanish. That fragility made every ordinary day valuable, because someone always had to survive to pass the knowledge on. Life was also about human relationships, close, intense, constant. There was no privacy, no personal space beyond what you could make with your body. Conflicts happened, annoyances piled up, tempers flared. But cooperation mattered more than anger. If you fought too long or too hard, you risked isolation. And isolation in a prehistoric world meant death. So people learned restraint. They learned negotiation. They learned when to step back. Emotions were ever present, but moderated. Intensity was dangerous. Practicality was survival. Even in moments of grief, quiet prevailed. Death wasn't celebrated or mourned with ceremony. It was acknowledged. Then life moved forward. Children learned this and internalized it. This is how communities endured. Now, consider technology. There were no factories, no schools, no libraries. Tools were made slowly, sharpened and repaired over and over, sometimes discarded if they failed. Nothing was permanent, nothing was fancy. Everything had to earn its place in daily survival. But that process created refinement. Stone edges became sharper, spears better balanced, cordage stronger. Small improvements stacked invisibly over decades, hundreds of years, generations. No one noticed the difference day to day, yet cumulative small improvements shaped human life profoundly. Social memory worked the same way. Stories weren't just entertainment, they were data, instructions, warnings, maps of survival encoded in words and gestures. One generation told the next, this way leads to water. This plant is poisonous.
This animal is dangerous when the wind shifts. The children memorized these stories. Eventually, they could navigate, gather, and survive as adults. Without these routines, knowledge would vanish. Without daily repetition, skills would fade. So mundane days were actually heroic, not because they were dramatic, but because they ensured continuity. And then there's the passage of time itself. Life was hard. Mortality was high. Few people lived past their 30s or 40s. Yet each person mattered. Every small action affected survival. Where a tool was left, how a child learned a skill, whether an elder was properly protected. Everything built towards the next day, the next season, the next generation. Even small mistakes could cascade into disaster. Even small insights could cascade into improvement. History, in the prehistoric sense, was being written every single ordinary day. And consider perspective. For a prehistoric person, time was measured in seasons and cycles, such as when the rains come, when the fruit ripens, when the cold passes. Not years, not decades. Life was immediate, practical, necessary. Yet through the lens of millennia, these cycles became history. Every fire tended, every berry gathered, every night survived. It was all part of a larger, slow, relentless story. A story without a beginning or end, only continuity. Because humanity spread not through sudden leaps or heroic deeds, but through ordinary persistence, step by step, camp by camp, season by season. Everything mundane stacked up. Everything ordinary became extraordinary. And now, imagine it all. Children growing up, learning, surviving. Adults aging, teaching, observing. Elders advising, correcting, preserving. Seasons changing, weather shifting, landscapes adjusting. Every day similar, yet subtly different. Every year ordinary, yet cumulatively shaping the human experience. Nothing flashy, nothing dramatic, nothing heroic in the sense we usually imagine. And yet, everything mattered. Because without these days, nothing that followed would exist. The next generation, the next continent, the next innovation, all depended on the steady persistence of the ordinary. Quiet endurance, practicality, adaptation. This is how prehistoric humans lived, how they survived, how they built humanity itself, one slow, ordinary, necessary day at a time. And that, in the end, is the most extraordinary thing of all.
All right, let's settle in one final time. We're going to stretch a bit further now, not just through ordinary days, but through the small, almost invisible changes that built the foundations of everything that came after. Because prehistoric life wasn't just surviving, it was also slowly inventing, adapting, and shaping culture in ways that no one could record at the time. Think back to those fires at night, flames flickering, faces half lit, shadows stretching across the ground. The same scene repeated countless times across countless generations. On the surface, it looks simple, mundane, but look closer and you see patterns forming. Tools improved, not because someone said, "Let's innovate today," but because someone noticed, "This stone cuts better if I hit it this way. This cordage holds more weight if I twist it differently. This fire lasts longer if I protect it from wind." No patents, no applause, just observation, experimentation, subtle trial and error. And because humans are social, these little innovations spread, copied by children, taught by elders, absorbed almost without thought. Culture, in the same way, grew slowly. Stories were the first libraries, oral, immediate, flexible. Stories weren't just about adventures or monsters, they were instructions, maps of survival. The river bends here, and there you'll find reeds for weaving. The berries here are safe, those over there are not.
the wind shifts this way when danger approaches. Stories carried memory, and memory carried life. Even rituals, small, seemingly meaningless patterns, helped bind the group. Maybe a careful placement of stones around a fire, maybe a chant or rhythm while pounding grain or meat, maybe a repeated gesture while lighting fire. No one called it ritual yet, but it created rhythm, predictability, safety. And let's talk language, though it wasn't like ours yet. Simple words, sounds, gestures, enough to coordinate tasks, to warn, to describe. Even a small vocabulary expanded survival possibilities. Water, fire, danger, eat. But over generations, those sounds layered into patterns, shared understanding, proto-culture. Communication was subtle, necessary. Life depended on clarity. Humor existed too, of course it did, though probably dry, muted, quiet. A misstep, a stumble, a playful squabble. Laughter softened tension and reinforced bonds. Now, think about clothing and shelter. Early humans didn't have fashion shows, they had necessity. But necessity is inventive. Animal hides were processed and shaped, fibers twisted into cords, woven into coverings. Shelters were improved incrementally, a rock slightly repositioned, a lean-to slightly higher, a cave space organized more efficiently. Each small improvement increased comfort, reduced risk, conserved energy. Even small changes mattered. Then there's movement. Early humans were constantly on the go, tracking animals, following seasons, exploring new territories. This movement itself was innovation. Routes were learned, landmarks remembered, maps etched in memory rather than on paper. Every journey strengthened spatial knowledge, every repetition refined judgment, every challenge improved problem solving. Food practices evolved as well. People experimented with different plants, tested which could be eaten raw or cooked, which roots were bitter, which berries were sweet, which storage methods prevented spoilage. Cooking, grinding, drying, small cumulative advances, nothing dramatic in the moment, but essential for survival. Social structures became layered. Everyone had a role. Some hunted, some gathered, some cared for children, some observed patterns, keeping memory alive. Hierarchy wasn't formal, but experience was authority. Leadership shifted based on task. Wisdom outweighed strength. Practicality outweighed pride. Groups that could cooperate survived. Groups that fractured did not. This is culture in its purest sense, shared knowledge, habits, roles, and memory. Over centuries, these ordinary innovations accumulated. A sharper blade, a safer fire, a better route, a more accurate story. Each small change might seem trivial on its own, but layered together over generations, they became remarkable. Because human life was short, memory was fragile, time was immediate. Yet cumulative knowledge created resilience. It allowed humans to expand into new territories, to endure changing climates, to survive famines, storms, and disease. And importantly, it laid the foundation for everything that followed. Agriculture, writing, cities, civilizations, none of it was inevitable. It emerged from countless ordinary, repetitive days lived carefully. So, when you think of prehistoric humans, don't picture only hunters and gatherers running through forests. Picture them sitting quietly by firelight, sharpening a tool, teaching a child, repairing a shelter, sharing a simple story, observing the sky, adjusting a habit. These were the real architects of the future. Not the dramatic leaps, not the heroic discoveries, but the slow, consistent, careful layering of knowledge, skill, and culture. Every day mattered. Every action counted. Every human, child, adult, elder, was a carrier of survival, memory, and subtle progress. And finally, think about continuity. Generations overlapped. Children became adults. Adults became elders. Elders guided the young. Knowledge passed silently. Experiments repeated. Tools refined. Stories retold. The world changed slowly. Humans adapted. Culture emerged. Civilization began, almost invisibly. And all of it came from ordinary, repetitive, necessary days lived fully, quietly, without fanfare. So now, as we end this long, slow journey, dim your lights, relax, and imagine the fire flickering one last time. The faces around it familiar and calm. Children dozing, adults observing, elders remembering. A rhythm of life so ordinary it feels invisible. And yet, this is the rhythm that created humanity, step by step, day by day, year by year. Silent, patient, persistent. The silent foundation beneath all history that came after. And in that, there is something extraordinary.
All right, get comfortable. Dim the lights. Stretch out. We're going to spend a long, slow day. Not just a day, but an ordinary, timeless day in prehistoric life. Hour by hour, step by step. The kind of day that repeats endlessly, with slight variations, yet shapes humanity in ways no one could have imagined. The first light creeps over the horizon, soft, pale, cautious, not the sun of modern schedules blasting alarms and notifications, just light, enough to nudge bodies awake. Humans stir, some slowly, some with more energy than the rest. Children blink sleep from their eyes, some yawn, some groan quietly, and some adults, whose backs protest the cold ground, stretch carefully, testing joints, muscles, and bones that have seen decades of life. Morning begins with observation, a quiet scan of the environment. Any unusual sounds? Tracks from animals? Wind direction? Smell of smoke from previous fires or fresh water nearby? These are important questions, simple but crucial. Breakfast is whatever can be gathered quickly. Berries, roots, nuts, whatever survived the night. Maybe a small animal left from a previous hunt. Nothing measured, nothing wasted. Energy is currency, and the morning is about collecting it efficiently. Adults move with habitual precision, hands almost automatically ready tools, knives, sharpened stones, cordage for carrying, all the objects they have curated carefully over weeks, months, sometimes years. Children mimic adults, unaware they are learning more than just gathering. They learn patience, observation, coordination, motor skills, and maybe, quietly, humor, the subtle, dry humor of human existence. A slip, a stumble, a shared glance that says, well, that didn't work. A ripple of quiet laughter. By mid-morning, the real work begins, hunting or gathering depending on the season. This is not heroic sprinting through forests like in movies. It is careful, methodical, measured, step by step, breath by breath. Hunting requires patience, quiet feet, sharp eyes, sharp ears, even sharper intuition. Everyone knows their place. The strongest might carry the weight, the wisest lead the route, the youngest observe, learning silently. Meanwhile, gatherers check known spots, collecting edible plants, roots, and berries, testing new patches occasionally, adjusting for seasonality. If a plant has gone bad, it's noted.
a mental map updated. No paper, no writing, just memory and repetition. By late morning, small adjustments occur. Someone moves a rock to make sitting easier. Someone repairs a cracked tool. Someone practices a new method of tying cordage. All small actions accumulate. Every tiny improvement matters. Lunch, though we don't call it that, is a brief pause. Not an elaborate meal, just energy replenishment. Chewing quietly, sometimes in low conversation. Stories may be shared. Observations passed along. Warnings, advice, minor complaints. Then the afternoon stretches long. The sun moves slowly across the sky. Shadows grow. Heat increases, then wanes. Hunting resumes. Gathering continues. Children are tested with small responsibilities. Carry a bundle. Spot tracks. Notice the ripening fruit. Sometimes the day brings interruptions. Weather shifts, a sudden downpour, wind picking up, clouds darkening the sun. Humans adapt immediately. Fires are sheltered, shelters reinforced. Groups huddle, conserve energy, wait. And here, boredom is valuable. Long periods of inactivity allow reflection. Humans notice small details, practice fine motor skills, plan subtle innovations, sharpen tools more precisely, tie fibers more effectively, all quietly, all gradually. By late afternoon, fatigue sets in. Bodies ache, backs stiffen, feet throb, joints protest. Still, survival requires attention. Food collected must be processed, shelter prepared for night, firewood gathered, water ensured. Even minor lapses could be costly. Yet the group is steady, balanced, cooperative. Children grow stronger in these hours. Adolescents gain confidence. Adults notice the subtle improvements in technique. Elders watch carefully, correct, guide, observe. Stories may grow longer now, patterns repeated, warnings encoded into narrative, simple lessons told as tales, practicality disguised in words. Evening comes slowly. The sun dips low. Shadows lengthen. Fires are lit, not blazing like modern lanterns, but sufficient. Warmth, light, comfort. Food is modestly prepared. Everyone eats. Energy restored. Not celebrated, just acknowledged. Then comes reflection. Low voices. Children lulled toward sleep by the repetition of routine and quiet storytelling. Adults plan tomorrow. Small adjustments noted. Some light tasks remain. Repair tools, check shelters, sharpen stones, tie cords. Elders speak, not loudly, not dramatically, just observations, guidance, gentle corrections. The weight of memory carried in soft tones. Night deepens. Everyone settles closer to fire. Some watch embers, some drift toward sleep slowly. Breathing syncs with the rhythm of the group. There is calm, no panic, no distraction beyond the essentials. The embers flicker, the wind whispers, the night is long but predictable. And in these hours, the foundation of humanity continues quietly. Every small action, tool repair, story, observation, guidance, memory. Every repetition, gathering, walking, waiting, teaching. Every subtle innovation, sharper blade, better cord, safer fire. These ordinary, uneventful, quiet actions accumulate, layer upon layer, generation upon generation. This is how humans survived, how they thrived, how they spread, how culture, knowledge, and society slowly emerged. Nothing dramatic, nothing heroic, just ordinary persistence, lived hour by hour. Morning comes again. The sun rises. Children awaken. Adults stretch. Fires are rekindled. Tools checked. Routines resumed. And the day repeats. The cycle continues. And this is prehistoric life. Slow, methodical, ordinary but infinitely important. Quiet persistence that built the foundation for everything to come. Step by step, hour by hour, day by day. If you take a deep breath now, you can almost feel it. The echo of countless days stretching endlessly. The rhythm of survival, the birth of culture, the invisible, ordinary work of humanity itself. And in that rhythm, you can almost sleep, because for prehistoric humans, as for us, the world keeps turning, and life continues, quietly, persistently, steadily. The ordinary is extraordinary, and that is the story of prehistoric humans, hour by hour, moment by moment, ordinary day by day.
All right. Stretch out. Adjust your position. Dim the lights even lower if you can. We're going to drift slowly into the social side of prehistoric life, the subtle currents beneath everyday survival. We've spent hours, days, and even lifetimes moving with the rhythm of survival, work, and rest. But humans aren't just bodies that move through time. They are social creatures, even prehistoric humans. Even in the smallest camps, even in the simplest settings, social life wove a constant, quiet pattern beneath everything else. The day begins as always, morning light, slow awakening, but social rhythms already exist. A glance exchanged between adults can communicate caution. A child mimicking a parent may earn a soft correction or an amused look. A tool placed carefully signals experience and consideration. Even in the earliest communities, hierarchies existed. Not rigid, not formalized, not leaders with crowns or titles, but roles, responsibilities, and authority, often defined by age, experience, or skill. An elder might speak quietly, almost sotto voce, and everyone listens. It's not demanded, it's practical. They have survived more seasons than anyone else. Their memory matters. The adult who is fastest or strongest may not always lead. The adult who knows the subtle patterns of prey movement or the most efficient gathering spots may be the de facto guide. Leadership is fluid, context-dependent, silent. Children, observing all of this, learn the rules of social life as subtly as they learn to gather berries. They watch, they mimic, they internalize. Conflict exists, of course, but not in the dramatic, cinematic sense. Not shouting matches or violent fights, usually. Mostly it is tension, quiet and persistent. Minor annoyances, competing priorities. Who gets first use of the fire? Who carries the heaviest load? Who takes the best position near the water? These conflicts are subtle. They are negotiation. They are social intelligence in action. Humans adjust. They compromise. Sometimes one person yields silently without a word. Sometimes another asserts themselves in a gentle but firm way. Because the stakes are survival. Social cohesion is more important than pride. By mid-morning, social patterns become more pronounced. Small tasks are divided based on skill, strength, and observation. Someone sharp-eyed may scan the horizon while others gather plants. Someone experienced with cordage may repair tools while others prepare firewood. Even laughter serves a purpose. Dry, muted humor, an unexpected stumble, a playful chase, reinforces bonds. It's social glue, subtle, effective. Conversations, low, practical, often repetitive, transmit knowledge across generations. Stories shared in these moments are not entertainment alone. They carry warnings, instructions, maps of survival encoded in narrative. By late morning, some tension may build naturally. Perhaps two adults argue over who should carry the larger load. Perhaps a child refuses to follow a parent's instruction. Resolution is quiet,
practical, almost automatic. Someone steps aside. Someone offers a small apology. A compromise is made. The group moves forward. There is no ceremony, no dramatic catharsis, only continuation. Afternoon brings routine again, but with social subtleties layered on. Hunters track prey together, silent and synchronized. Their movements reflect trust, anticipation, and learned coordination. Even the slightest misstep could disrupt a hunt or a fragile pattern of cooperation. Gatherers coordinate silently too. Hand signals, glances, a nod toward a safer path. Children continue learning, now through increasingly complex social cues. Who speaks when, how to observe without interrupting, when to imitate, when to ask. By now, hierarchy and experience are firmly visible. Not oppressive, not rigid, but practical. The social web is invisible but present, guiding everything. Evening, as always, brings calm. Fires glow, food is shared, stories told. Low conversation continues, repeating patterns learned over lifetimes. Subtle social lessons are embedded in stories. Observing the stars, noting seasonal changes, remembering roots, all become shared knowledge, but also shared experience. Social cohesion reinforced through practice, narrative, and memory. Children absorb these lessons silently. Adults reinforce them subtly. Elders observe. Guidance is given quietly without confrontation. Even small gestures matter. Who sits near the fire? Who tends it longer? Who helps the injured or sick? These gestures, repeated endlessly, create trust. They ensure survival. They reinforce the invisible bonds that hold the group together. Night deepens. Fires burn low. Bodies gather for warmth. Sleeping arrangements reinforce protection and cohesion. Even sleeping is social. Positioning matters. Those most vulnerable sleep closest to others. Those needing fewer defenses rest slightly apart, but within sight. The rhythm is constant, calm, reassuring. Conflicts that arose during the day dissolve quietly in the night. Tension released by sleep. Trust silently reaffirmed. As the night stretches, elders may speak softly. Not lectures, not dramatic storytelling, just observations. Remember that place by the river. Check the firewood early tomorrow. The wind shifts at dusk this season. Practical wisdom repeated endlessly. Every word counts, every memory preserved. Children drift to sleep beside the warmth. Adults watch embers flicker. The group is quiet, cohesive, and enduring. Through years, these rhythms accumulate. Social patterns, trust networks, memory networks, cultural patterns. Everything mundane is monumental. Every glance, every gesture, every shared task contributes to survival. Every quiet adjustment, every subtle compromise, every repeated story strengthens cohesion, and cohesion ensures survival. Through this quiet social life, prehistoric humans learned more than survival. They learned culture, they learned cooperation, they learned human connection. Without social cohesion, knowledge would vanish. Without trust, cooperation would fail. Without repetition, memory would fade. And yet, all of this is invisible on the surface. Quiet, ordinary, everyday. By the end of the night, the fire dims. People rest, bodies tired, minds alert to subtle cues, dreams shaped by the day's rhythms. And somewhere in that quiet night, the social web tightens further. Connections grow stronger, patterns repeat, knowledge passes, culture continues. This is prehistoric social life, silent, persistent, subtle, ordinary, and yet foundational for everything that followed. Step by step, hour by hour, gesture by gesture. Humanity built not just on survival, but on connection, trust, observation, memory, and endless quiet cooperation.
All right, settle in one last time. Adjust your position, let your body sink into comfort, and let your mind drift slowly. We're going to finish this long journey by reflecting on the totality of prehistoric life, hour by hour, day by day, generation by generation. Because the story of prehistoric humans is not a story of sudden leaps or dramatic discoveries. It's the story of ordinary days repeated endlessly, quietly, persistently. And in that repetition lies the foundation of all humanity. Morning begins as always. Light creeps softly over the horizon. Shadows stretch. Birds may call in the distance. Perhaps a gentle breeze rustles leaves. Humans awaken, some slowly, some with a small practical stretch to limber their joints. Children blink awake, yawning, rubbing their eyes. Adults stand, testing muscles, adjusting their posture after a long night of rest. Fires are rekindled, not for spectacle, not for ceremony, but for warmth, for cooking, for safety. Breakfast is modest, simple, functional. Edible plants, leftover cooked meat, nuts, berries. Each bite is measured for energy, not enjoyment. Yet there is satisfaction, quiet and steady, in being fed, in surviving another day. The day unfolds gradually, predictably, but never monotonously. Children accompany adults, observe, mimic, learn. Every stumble is a lesson. Every successful action is remembered. Adults carry tools, repair what is broken, sharpen what is dull. Movements are precise, habitual. Coordination is perfected over countless repetitions. Hunting is slow and methodical. Patience matters more than strength. Observation outweighs impulsive action. Success depends on cooperation and trust, quietly understood and rarely verbalized. Gathering is equally deliberate, tracking seasonal changes, remembering which plants are edible, which are toxic, testing new sources. Every action recorded mentally, transmitted across generations. Social life continues seamlessly alongside survival. Trust and hierarchy exist quietly. Experience guides authority. Subtle gestures, glances, small acts of kindness or correction maintain cohesion. Even minor annoyances are managed with restraint. Conflict is present but muted, resolved through compromise, patience, or practical adjustment, because survival depends on cooperation more than pride. Humor exists, dry, quiet, low volume. A slip, a stumble, a playful squabble, a brief smile, shared glance. These small moments reinforce bonds, lighten tension, and remind everyone that life, even when challenging, has tiny sparks of relief. Innovation occurs invisibly. Tools are sharpened more efficiently. Shelters are slightly improved. Fires burn longer, safer. Cordage holds more weight. No one marks the change with ceremony. No one documents progress, but improvements accumulate, layer by layer, generation by generation. Every tiny improvement increases survival chances. Every repeated story encodes knowledge. Every glance, gesture, and shared action preserves culture. Afternoons pass in quiet rhythm. Hunting, gathering, repairing, observing, teaching, learning. The repetition is meditative. The day stretches slowly, almost imperceptibly. Energy is managed carefully. Bodies conserve strength. Minds remain alert. Children test their growing skills. Adults reinforce instruction silently. Elders observe, guiding with minimal intervention. Even minor errors are corrected subtly. A misstep in tracking, a misjudged route, a forgotten story detail, all corrected gently with patience, ensuring survival without creating tension. Evening falls, shadows lengthen, the sun dips, fires are rekindled, the group gathers close, sharing warmth, food, and observation. Stories are retold, refined, repeated, warnings, guidance, lessons, all encoded in narrative. Children absorb this quietly, often half asleep, learning the patterns of life without even realizing it. Social cohesion strengthens, trust reinforced, cooperation deepened. The invisible threads that bind the group together are renewed nightly. Night deepens. Humans settle for rest. Positions are chosen carefully. Proximity to fire, proximity to others. Vulnerable members shielded naturally. Sleep becomes both recovery and reinforcement of social structure. Even dreams may reflect the patterns of the day, hunting paths, gathering spots, seasonal changes, skills practiced subconsciously. And through it all, life continues. Now, step back and consider the larger picture. Each ordinary day repeats endlessly. Each small action, feeding a child, repairing a tool, sharing a story, adds to cumulative survival. Every repeated routine, every subtle social adjustment, every minor innovation builds culture. Slowly, quietly, imperceptibly. Time is measured in seasons, not years, in cycles of sun, moon, and weather, in migration, in the ripening of berries, in the fall of leaves. Life is practical, measured, continuous, yet in this quiet continuity lies the extraordinary. Prehistoric humans are not remembered for heroism or conquest. They are remembered, though rarely documented, for persistence, for subtlety, for cooperation, for patience. Every ordinary day mattered. Every hour, every gesture, every careful action contributed to the survival of the group, the accumulation of knowledge, and the shaping of humanity itself. Imagine this cycle stretching across generations. Children become adults, adults become elders, knowledge passes silently, innovations build slowly, stories grow richer, skills improve incrementally. Every life touches the next, every day contributes, everything mundane becomes essential. Without these ordinary days, nothing that followed would exist. No agriculture, no writing, no civilizations, no cities, no recorded history. All of it is built on countless invisible ordinary moments. And finally, consider the human spirit within all this. Adaptation, observation, persistence, patience, cooperation. All lived quietly, without fanfare, all repeated day after day, all necessary. The legacy of prehistoric humans is not flashy, not dramatic, not heroic in the cinematic sense. It is the legacy of ordinary life lived attentively, persistently, cooperatively, quietly. Hour by hour, day by day, generation by generation. And in that ordinary persistence, they created the foundations of everything that came after. So now, as the fire dims and the night stretches endlessly, as humans drift into sleep beside it, we too can rest, reflecting on the slow accumulation of culture, survival, and human connection. The ordinary layered upon the ordinary, becoming extraordinary. Because if we watch closely, we see the rhythm that created humanity, step by step, hour by hour, day by day. And that, finally, is the story of prehistoric life. Quiet, ordinary, enduring, and infinitely significant.
All right, let's settle in again. Deep breath. Imagine yourself not in a modern room, but in an open, prehistoric landscape. The air is cool, fresh, and carries the faint scent of earth and fire. We're going to expand our view now, beyond a single day, beyond a single group, to consider the long rhythms of prehistoric life across seasons and years, and how these quiet patterns shaped humanity. Life was dictated by nature, not calendars, not clocks, but cycles. Seasons, weather patterns, daylight, animal migration. Spring brought melting ice, budding plants, and emerging insects. Hunters followed prey returning from winter grounds. Gatherers sought early greens, tender shoots, and first berries. Summer stretched long and warm. Days were long, providing ample opportunity for work. Fires were lit mainly for cooking and warmth at night. Tools were sharpened, shelters repaired, social routines strengthened. Autumn arrived with a different rhythm. The harvest of wild fruits and roots reached its peak. Animals fattened for winter, but were also more cautious. Humans prepared for scarcity. Knowledge about storing food and preserving game became crucial. Winter brought challenges. Cold, short days, scarce food. Survival required careful planning. Groups huddled for warmth. Fires burned steadily. Social bonds, already subtle, became vital. The survival of the group depended on cooperation more than ever. Through each season, humans observed patterns. They noted which plants ripened first, where animals moved, rested, and fed, which storms were predictable, which stars indicated change. Observation became knowledge. Knowledge became wisdom. Wisdom was transmitted silently, quietly, slowly. Now imagine the long-term evolution of culture. Tools improved incrementally over generations. A sharper blade, a sturdier spear, a cord that held heavier loads. Each innovation is small, almost imperceptible in the moment, yet over decades and centuries, these small changes accumulate into technological progress. Fire use evolved subtly, not through sudden discovery, but through experimentation. How to start it faster, how to keep it burning longer, which materials produced the strongest flame, which placements minimized smoke inhalation. Even shelter evolved. Rocks arranged more efficiently, branches stacked sturdily, fur or bark layered for insulation. Shelters grew slowly more comfortable, more protective, more enduring. Every ordinary adjustment mattered. Every tiny improvement increased survival, efficiency, and comfort. Social life also evolved over long stretches. Early humans learned patterns of leadership, cooperation, and trust. Groups that coordinated well survived. Groups that fractured did not. Knowledge was passed not only through direct teaching, but also through ritual, repetition, and observation. Children learned by watching adults. Adults learned by watching elders. Memory networks developed, shared understanding of territory, prey, plant cycles, and social norms. Even subtle humor, playful gestures, and shared routines reinforced cohesion. This was social evolution in action. Slow, incremental, nearly invisible, but profoundly effective. Now let's consider interaction with the environment. Humans did not live separately from nature. They were embedded within it. Every action had consequences. Over years, they learned which trees provided the best firewood, which rivers were safest for crossing, which plants repelled insects, which locations offered shelter from wind and cold. Observation led to adaptation. Adaptation led to improved survival. Improved survival led to stability. Stability allowed humans to experiment. Experimentation led to culture.
Culture led to subtle innovations that accumulated over generations. The slow accumulation of knowledge is crucial here. Unlike a single discovery in isolation, prehistoric life depended on repetition and continuity. Sharpen a blade today. Teach a child how to observe tracks tomorrow. Repair a shelter this week. Remember patterns of migration this season. Passed from person to person, year to year. The survival of knowledge depended on social bonds, memory, and repetition. Every ordinary day reinforced extraordinary continuity. As the evening stretches again, imagine a group gathered by fire, the air cool, the embers glowing. Children asleep, adults resting, elders observing. The rhythm of life continues, ordinary but profound, subtle, repetitive, persistent. The accumulation of knowledge, culture, and human connection over generations. And in that quiet rhythm, we find the extraordinary, the foundation of everything human, step by step, hour by hour, day by day.
All right, let's settle in for the final stretch. Dim the lights fully. Sink into your seat or bed. Imagine the distant past, stretching endlessly, a vast landscape of forests, rivers, mountains, and plains. And there, in this world, humans, ordinary, persistent, observant, and social, move quietly through the rhythm of life. This is the long view. Not a single day, not a single group, not a single event, but centuries, millennia, the slow accumulation of knowledge, behavior, and culture that eventually shaped the world we live in today. Prehistoric life begins with the day-to-day, the ordinary, and stretches into the extraordinary only over time. Morning arrives slowly, light spilling across the landscape. Humans awake. Children stretch and yawn. Adults test muscles and joints. Fires are rekindled. Breakfast is modest, functional, necessary. The rhythm of survival continues. Hunting, gathering, observing, repairing, teaching, and learning. But beneath this rhythm flows a subtle, persistent social current. Trust networks are quietly reinforced. Social bonds strengthen through cooperation, laughter, shared labor, and silent gestures. Hierarchy is not rigid, but functional. Experience guides authority. Elders pass on memory. Adults transmit skill. Children absorb knowledge naturally. Seasons shape life profoundly. Spring encourages growth, exploration, and learning. Summer provides long days, abundant food, and extended observation. Autumn signals preparation, reflection, and preservation. Winter tests endurance, cooperation, and careful planning. Humans observe. They notice subtle patterns in plant growth, animal behavior, weather, and celestial movements. This is the origin of proto-science: careful observation, incremental experimentation, repetition, and memory. Even small innovations, sharper tools, sturdier shelters, better fire management, compound over generations. Nothing monumental in the moment, but monumental in retrospect. Social life evolves slowly but critically. Humans are group creatures. Every gesture, glance, or small action influences cohesion. Minor conflicts are resolved quietly. Minor frustrations dissipate through subtle humor or compromise. Children learn these norms naturally by imitation and observation. Humor, play, and small rituals reinforce trust. These aren't frivolous, they are essential.
Cooperation ensures survival. Without subtle social intelligence, the group would falter. And so, the ordinary social life, the quiet interactions, the shared tasks, the gentle guidance becomes foundational culture. Even emotional life is part of this pattern. Frustration, joy, relief, curiosity, fear, sadness. Emotions are experienced but moderated by the collective rhythm of the group. They are observed, transmitted, and subtly managed. Through quiet observation, humans learn empathy, patience, and timing. Social cohesion depends on subtle understanding of the emotional landscape of others. Over generations, knowledge accumulates. Every repeated story, every successful hunt, every carefully observed pattern of nature, every repaired tool, every taught lesson, layer by layer, year by year, century by century. This is how culture forms. Not in sudden leaps, not in dramatic events, not in grand monuments. Culture grows in repetition, continuity, subtlety, and patience. Even proto-art appears in quiet moments. A pigment smeared on a shell, a carving on rock, a pattern in clay, a symbol that conveys meaning, identity, or memory. Each small creative act adds depth to human experience, slowly transforming survival into culture. Innovation and adaptation continue imperceptibly. Sharper blades, better cordage, more effective shelters. Observations of prey and plants, routes memorized, migration patterns understood. Every incremental improvement increases efficiency, comfort, and safety. Humans gradually move from mere survival to subtle mastery of their environment. They begin to anticipate, plan, experiment, create. Now let's take the long lens. Centuries pass. Generations rise and fall. Each generation learns the lessons of those before. Failures are remembered. Successes are repeated. Knowledge accumulates. Memory networks expand. Social cohesion is maintained. Trust networks strengthen. Skills are transmitted. Cultural habits are embedded. Humans begin to manipulate the environment in more sophisticated ways. They select plants for usefulness. They domesticate animals. They develop proto-tools for specialized purposes. And all of this begins with the quiet, ordinary days of survival, observation, and social life. The fire at night is always central. Its warmth, protection, comfort. Its gathering, storytelling, reflection. It's the hub of the social web. It's the site where lessons, humor, warnings, and guidance are shared. Around the fire, humans rehearse culture. They practice social cohesion. They transmit memory. They plan survival. Even in silence, the fire illuminates continuity. Every ember reminds the group of repeated action, enduring effort, and human persistence. And in this persistence lies the extraordinary. Ordinary days repeated endlessly become culture. Simple survival becomes knowledge. Knowledge becomes wisdom. Wisdom becomes innovation. Innovation becomes civilization. Every hour, every gesture, every quiet observation contributes. The mundane becomes monumental. The ordinary becomes extraordinary. Finally, consider the long-term legacy. From these quiet prehistoric lives, every modern human trait emerges. Social intelligence, cooperation, patience, observation, tool use, language, memory, storytelling, art, innovation, all derived from ordinary days lived attentively. Every human today carries traces of these rhythms. The need for social cohesion, the impulse to observe and learn, the habit of repeating useful actions, the quiet accumulation of knowledge. All of it began in prehistoric life. Hour by hour, day by day, season by season, generation by generation. So, as night stretches one last time, imagine the group of humans resting beside the fire. Children sleeping. Adults vigilant but relaxed. Elders observing and remembering. The fire glowing low. Life continues quietly. Knowledge accumulates silently. Culture grows slowly. And in that quiet rhythm, humanity emerges. Step by step, hour by hour, day by day, year by year. And that, finally, is the story of prehistoric life. Ordinary, persistent, subtle, enduring, and infinitely significant.
All right, let's settle in for the final stretch, deeper than before. Imagine the soft flicker of firelight illuminating a prehistoric camp. The smell of earth, smoke, and warm stone drifts in the air. Silence stretches, broken only by subtle sounds. The wind, a bird, distant water, the slow breathing of those resting. We're now stepping back further, beyond daily life, beyond individual communities, beyond generations. We're going to consider time itself, human persistence, and the quiet threads that connect prehistoric life to our world today. Humans are strange in one fundamental way. We remember, we observe, we repeat, and we build. From the simplest observation of a plant or an animal or the movement of clouds, humans began to form patterns of understanding. All right, settle in once again. Let the room grow quiet. The world fades softly around you, and you are transported to a prehistoric landscape. Open plains, forests, rivers glinting in the sunlight, the faint warmth of a fire at your feet. We've followed the lives of prehistoric humans hour by hour, day by day, season by season. We've explored their social bonds, their innovations, their rhythms. Now, we take the longest view yet, connecting the quiet, ordinary persistence of prehistoric life to the modern world we know. Consider time as a river. Prehistoric life was upstream. Every step, every observation, every shared story is a drop of water flowing downstream. Generation after generation, small actions accumulated. The river grew wider, the current strengthened. Eventually, it becomes the river of modern humanity. Every human today is a downstream passenger of that river. Our habits, our social instincts, our ingenuity, even our emotional rhythms are echoes of ordinary days lived tens of thousands of years ago. Let's reflect on innovation and creativity. Even the smallest acts of prehistoric humans, sharpening a stone, arranging a shelter, painting a simple pattern, were seeds of culture. Incremental improvement is the key. A slightly sharper blade,
a slightly sturdier spear, a fire that burns longer, observation of seasons and animal behavior. Each small step repeated over generations eventually produces complex culture, language, and technology. Modern humans, surrounded by cities, machines, and digital devices, carry the quiet imprint of those simple, patient innovations. Every tool, every structured action, every ritual begins there in the slow accumulation of ordinary skill. Social life, too, echoes across time. Trust, cooperation, subtle humor, shared labor, these were not optional. They were survival mechanisms. And they became habits, shaping emotional intelligence and social structures. When we laugh together, when we work together, when we comfort, guide, or instruct, we are channeling the same social rhythms that prehistoric humans relied on to survive. Humanity is built on invisible scaffolding, networks of cooperation, repetition, and patience. Now, consider memory and storytelling. Stories were not entertainment in prehistory. They were instruction, caution, and continuity. They passed knowledge, encoded survival strategies, and strengthened social bonds. Modern culture, books, films, education, oral traditions, is an extension of that ancient habit. We pass lessons from one generation to another. We observe, repeat, and innovate. Without those first fireside lessons, humanity could not have survived, let alone thrived. Even our emotional lives carry prehistoric echoes. Frustration when plans fail, joy when cooperation succeeds, empathy for children, peers, or the weak, fear in the face of danger, relief when safety is restored. All of these were finely tuned over millennia. They are adaptive, functional, and persistent. We carry the emotional rhythms of survival, socially reinforced across countless generations. Let's think about the long accumulation of knowledge. Prehistoric humans experimented, observed, and repeated. They improved tools, fire management, shelters, and techniques. They passed knowledge silently. They learned from failure. They innovated through repetition. Over centuries, these ordinary actions became extraordinary. The foundations of agriculture, domestication of animals, the first permanent settlements, the birth of civilizations. All of it is built on the quiet, patient work of ordinary prehistoric humans. Even creativity and art emerge naturally from this rhythm. A pigment on a shell, a simple engraving on a rock, a pattern etched into clay. These are small acts, yet profound. They are evidence of reflection, communication, and identity. They are the earliest traces of human imagination. And imagination, passed along quietly, fuels every human innovation that follows. Now, step back and observe the full panorama. Children learning by watching, adults guiding silently, elders observing and preserving memory, groups cooperating, surviving, and innovating, seasons shaping life, cycles repeating endlessly, knowledge accumulating slowly, culture emerging quietly, innovation building incrementally. And through all this, humanity grows, not suddenly, not dramatically, not with fanfare, but steadily, persistently, patiently. Finally, consider our connection to the past. Every habit, every social instinct, every skill we have today is a reflection of those ordinary prehistoric days. Our laughter, our care, our curiosity, our creativity, all echoes of a rhythm established tens of thousands of years ago. Step by step, hour by hour, day by day, season by season, generation by generation. Prehistoric humans lived ordinary lives, but their persistence created everything extraordinary about us today. So as the night deepens,
Imagine the prehistoric fire one last time. Children asleep, adults resting, elders observing. The embers glow softly. The air is still, and life continues, quietly, persistently, and in that quiet rhythm, we recognize the origin of everything human. Step by step, hour by hour, day by day, season by season, ordinary, persistent, subtle, enduring, and infinitely significant.
All right. Take a deep breath. Let the room settle. Dim lights. Close your eyes if you like, and imagine the soft flicker of a prehistoric fire in the distance. The wind rustles the trees. A river murmurs far away. Life is quiet, ordinary, and persistent. We've walked through hours, days, seasons, generations, and centuries. We've observed prehistoric humans as they hunted, gathered, rested, taught, and observed. Now we step into the final perspective, a reflection on legacy, continuity, and the invisible threads connecting them to us today. Prehistoric life was never spectacular in the way modern stories portray. No grand battles, no towering cities, no sudden revolutions. Instead, it was slow, ordinary, persistent, and quietly miraculous. Sharpen a stone, observe a plant, repair a shelter, pass knowledge silently, huddle for warmth, laugh softly with your companions. These actions, repeated over countless generations, form the foundation of everything human. Consider time itself. A day in prehistory is short, a life is fleeting, but generations overlap. Knowledge accumulates, culture grows incrementally. Step by step, hour by hour, day by day, season by season, generation by generation. And with each repetition, humanity becomes slightly more capable, slightly more aware, slightly more inventive, slightly more connected. Let's reflect on human curiosity and observation. Even the smallest details mattered. Which berries are edible? Which tracks belong to dangerous animals? Which winds predict storms? Which stars signal seasonal change? Observation was essential. Curiosity was survival. Experimentation was learning. And all of this knowledge is carried invisibly forward. Every human today benefits from the accumulated observations of prehistoric life. Social life, too, is rooted in persistence. Cooperation ensures survival. Trust maintains cohesion. Subtle humor smooths tension. Conflict is managed quietly. We think of social skills as modern or sophisticated, but they are ancient adaptations honed over tens of thousands of years. When we laugh together, work together, or comfort someone, we echo prehistoric social patterns. Emotions, memory, and ritual are also part of this rhythm. Frustration, fear, joy, curiosity, empathy, these are adaptive tools. Memory preserves knowledge, ritual reinforces social cohesion, and subtle repetition transforms ordinary actions into culture. Even our simplest acts, preparing food, making tools, telling a story, observing a pattern, are echoes of prehistoric life. Let's think about innovation and creativity. A sharpened stone, a fire maintained, a decorated shell, a simple mark on rock. Small acts repeated quietly over generations create culture. Incremental innovation becomes art, language, and technology. Every modern invention, every complex system begins in the same quiet way. Prehistoric humans lived hour by hour, day by day, season by season. Morning, gather, observe, prepare. Afternoon, hunt, repair, explore. Evening,
Fire, teach, socialize, rest. Night, sleep, dream, imagine. Seasons shape rhythm. Years shape cycles. Generations preserve knowledge. And all of this quietly accumulates into civilization. Now, let's consider the full human continuum, from the first cautious observation of an animal track, to the first controlled fire, to the first shelter constructed for warmth and safety, to the first shared lesson, repeated and preserved. Each small, ordinary act builds the invisible scaffolding of humanity. And all of this persists in us today. Our habits, social instincts, emotional intelligence, curiosity, and creativity. Every ordinary prehistoric day echoes in modern life. Even humor and subtle social cues matter. A shared smile around the fire, a quiet gesture of help, a playful tease. These are ancient, functional, and persistent. They reinforce trust and cohesion, and they ensure survival. Finally, consider the long-term rhythm. Step by step, hour by hour, day by day, season by season, generation by generation. Ordinary actions, repeated endlessly, become extraordinary. Persistence becomes culture. Observation becomes knowledge. Cooperation becomes civilization. And in that gentle rhythm, humanity emerges, not dramatically, not violently, not in a single moment of genius, but patiently, quietly, steadily. So, as the prehistoric fire glows one last time, imagine: morning, gather, observe, prepare; afternoon, hunt, repair, explore; evening, fire, teach, socialize, rest; night, sleep, dream, imagine. Seasons shape rhythm. Years shape cycles. Generations preserve knowledge. And all of this quietly accumulates into civilization. Now, let's consider the full human continuum, from the first cautious observation of an animal track, to the first controlled fire, to the first shelter constructed for warmth and safety, to the first shared lesson, repeated and preserved. Each small, ordinary act builds the invisible scaffolding of humanity. And all of this persists in us today. Our habits, social instincts, emotional intelligence, curiosity, and creativity. Every ordinary prehistoric day echoes in modern life. Even humor and subtle social cues matter. A shared smile around the fire, a quiet gesture of help, a playful tease. These are ancient, functional, and persistent. They reinforce trust and cohesion, and they ensure survival. Finally, consider the long-term rhythm. Step by step, hour by hour, day by day, season by season, generation by generation. Ordinary actions, repeated endlessly, become extraordinary. Persistence becomes culture. Observation becomes knowledge. Cooperation becomes civilization. And in that gentle rhythm, humanity emerges, not dramatically, not violently, not in a single moment of genius, but patiently, quietly, steadily. So, as the prehistoric fire glows one last time, imagine: morning, gather, observe, prepare; afternoon, hunt, repair, explore; evening, fire, teach, socialize, rest; night, sleep, dream, imagine. Seasons shape rhythm. Years shape cycles. Generations preserve knowledge. And all of this quietly accumulates into civilization. Now, let's consider the full human continuum, from the first cautious observation of an animal track, to the first controlled fire, to the first shelter constructed for warmth and safety, to the first shared lesson, repeated and preserved. Each small, ordinary act builds the invisible scaffolding of humanity. And all of this persists in us today. Our habits, social instincts, emotional intelligence, curiosity, and creativity. Every ordinary prehistoric day echoes in modern life. Even humor and subtle social cues matter. A shared smile around the fire, a quiet gesture of help, a playful tease. These are ancient, functional, and persistent. They reinforce trust and cohesion, and they ensure survival. Finally, consider the long-term rhythm. Step by step, hour by hour, day by day, season by season, generation by generation. Ordinary actions, repeated endlessly, become extraordinary. Persistence becomes culture. Observation becomes knowledge. Cooperation becomes civilization. And in that gentle rhythm, humanity emerges, not dramatically, not violently, not in a single moment of genius, but patiently, quietly, steadily. So, as the prehistoric fire glows one last time, imagine: morning, gather, observe, prepare; afternoon, hunt, repair, explore; evening, fire, teach, socialize, rest; night, sleep,